The fourth soil composition is soil air. Soil air is also essential in agricultural production. Why? It is necessary for respiration of roots and animals in the soil. Apart from that, nitrogen gas is also a good example of soil air. This nitrogen gas can be converted into nitrates. These nitrates, in this case, it means should be the nutrients which can be absorbed by plants, which can be used by plants. Apart from that, if there is good aeration, it will increase microbial activities. Remember, microbial activities, decomposition process, we mentioned earlier. Decomposition process is facilitated by some microorganisms, and those microorganisms, they also need air. So if in the soil there's good aeration, definitely it will increase microbial activities in the soil. Apart from that, if there is good air circulation in the soil, it will help to remove excess carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is poisonous to plants if found in the soil. So if there is good air circulation, at least it will help to flush away excess carbon dioxide. We can also do an experiment to determine the mass as well, the volume as well as the percentage of air in the soil. So we also need some apparatus here. For example, we need measuring cylinder. We also need the soil sample. We need distilled water as well as even the beakers. So here is the procedure. You put, let's say you put 100 cubic centimeters of water into 250 cubic centimeter measuring cylinder. Then you also use a 100 cubic centimeter beaker, fill it with soil up to the mark. In this case, up to 100 cubic centimeters. Then you empty the soil from the beaker into the measuring cylinder. The measuring cylinder, which we have mentioned, of 250 cubic centimeters. Then you shake well. In this case, we'll have the mixture of water and soil. So as you are shaking the mixture, you should observe that you find out that some bubbles will be escaping from the beaker. Then after all the bubbles have escaped, record the final reading of the mixture. So on the observation, we're saying that you find out that the bubbles will come up from the soil. This means that the water is displacing the air. So this shows that both air and water will occupy the same spaces in the soil. Let's now calculate the volume in percentage of air in the soil. We'll mention that the garden soil volume was 100 cubic centimeters. The volume of water was also 100 cubic centimeters. Therefore, the expected volume, if we can mix the two, should be 200 cubic centimeters. But the final readings will give us the different volume. For example, let the final reading of mixture be 175 cubic centimeters. It means the volume of air will be 200, that is expected volume, minus the final reading of the mixture. So the final reading of the mixture, we have said that let it be 175 cubic centimeters. So the volume of air should be 200 minus 175. So this will give us 25 cubic centimeters. Therefore, the percentage of air will be 25, which is the volume of air, divided by 100, that is the volume of soil, times 100. So this will give us 25%. This will give us 25%. In short, or in conclusion, we can say that really in the soil we can find air, or air is a constituent of the soil. Of course, the volume of air as well as the percentage of air will be different depending on the type of the soil as well. Let's finish by looking on the last component of the soil, which is living organisms. On living organisms, we may have micro as well as macroorganisms. So in the soil, we may have micro as well as macroorganisms. Microorganisms, good examples, we have bacteria as well as fungi. On macroorganisms, we have earthworms, ants, etc., etc. These living organisms are very, very essential in decomposition process, which we have mentioned earlier on. More especially microorganisms, bacteria as well as fungi. They will really help in decomposition process. Unfortunately, these microorganisms, which we are saying they are essential in decomposition process, we cannot see them using our naked eyes, but we can see them using electronic microscope. So these organisms, living organisms, they are also important during soil formation. They also help in soil formation. So since we have mentioned that these microorganisms, we cannot see them with our naked eyes, but only the use of electronic microscope, but we can also conduct an experiment just to prove that in the soil there are some of the living organisms, be it micro or macroorganisms. So in order for us to know that if really in the soil we can have some organisms, we can conduct an experiment. So in order for us to conduct an experiment or an investigation, we'll need some of the materials, and these materials which will be needed are two soil samples. One should be a fresh garden soil, the other one should be burnt soil or strongly heated soil. Apart from that, we also need a muslin cloth. About 2 of them, 2 muslin cloths. I also need 2 strings, or need 2 rubber corks. We also need 2 conical flasks, and not forgetting lime water. In the procedure, you put the 2 soil samples, one which is the fresh soil, in a muslin cloth and tie at the top. Let's assume that the fresh soil which have been put in one of the muslin cloth weighs 10 grams. It means even the strongly heated soil or the bent soil should also weigh 10 grams. So we're going to put that 10 grams of strongly heated soil in another muslin cloth and tie at the top. Then another step can be you suspend each muslin bag with a string. Definitely we're going to tie that string to each muslin bag. So you suspend each muslin bag with a string in separate conical flask. And each conical flask should contain equal amount of lime water. If it is 20 cubic centimeters, it means in both conical flasks would be the same 20 cubic centimeters. So you label them A as well as B respectively, meaning conical flask A, which is containing fresh garden soil, will be labeled A, while conical flask, the other conical flask containing strongly heated soil will be labeled B. Then you make the flask airtight with the rubber cork. In short, you just use that rubber cork and close the conical flask so that no more air should be entering in both flasks. Then you leave these 2 flasks for about 3 hours. Then after that, you can observe and record the results. Yeah, so this is how our experiment should set up. At least you should have 2 conical flasks labeled A as well as B, Then each conical flask should contain a muslin bag, a muslin bag with a string suspended in the conical flask. But make sure that one muslin bag should contain a fresh garden soil, while the other one should contain bent soil. Should contain a bent soil. Then should have lime water filled in each conical flask. Remember, should be of the same amount. Apart from that, you should not forget to airtight the conical flask, the 2 conical flasks, so that should not allow any air to penetrate in the 2 conical flasks. So after 3 hours, you found out that in flask A, the lime water turned into milky or cloudy. But in flask B, there is no change at all. The lime water is still clear. Most of the times the lime water is clear. But after 3 hours in flask A, we're saying that the lime water turned into milky or cloudy. Why in flask A, we are saying that the lime water is turning into milky? The assumption is that since the fresh garden soil was not burnt, it means some microorganisms were available there. So those microorganisms, they undergo a respiration process whereby they'll take in oxygen and take out carbon dioxide. So that carbon dioxide which have been produced by the living organisms, once it reaches the lime water, the water now turns from clear to milky. So it's because of the reaction of carbon dioxide and lime water, which is making the lime water to change its color from clear to cloudy. But in flask B, since the soil which was used was burnt, meaning that we know that organisms, they cannot survive at extremely high temperature. So the assumption is that all the organisms which are available in that soil, after burning the soil, it means the microorganisms have been killed due to excessive heating. So that's why there was no production of carbon dioxide. Therefore, no reaction was there between carbon dioxide and lime water. That's why the lime water did not change. It was still clear. So through this experiment, it clearly shows that soil contains microorganisms. Remember, I said that on this topic of soil, we're going to discuss two items: that's soil composition and soil profile. So here we are. We should discuss more about soil profile. Soil profile refers to the vertical arrangement of different layers of soil, that is from ground surface to the bedrock. From ground surface to the bedrock. When the soil is being formed, most of the times it will form some layers. It will form some layers. They will form different layers. And those layers which are formed, most of the times they are formed vertically. They are formed vertically in the soil, on the ground. So that vertical arrangement of different layers of soil which are formed from the ground surface to the bedrock is what we call soil profile. And most of the times these layers are called horizons and are very distinct, meaning that we can easily trace them. We can easily trace them. More especially where the soil forming process has taken place over a long period of time. So you can easily trace these layers. So mainly, the soil profile is made up of 4 layers. There are 4 main layers or horizons. And these are topsoil, subsoil, weathered rocks, and parent rock, or sometimes it is called the bed rock. So the topsoil, sometimes it is known as the horizon A, or subsoil called horizon B, weathered rocks horizon C, and parent rock horizon D or R. So, as I've already said that most of the times, if the soils have been formed over a long period of time, they will form some distinctive layers. So this is the clear picture or diagram of the soil profile showing some layers. We have the topsoil here, a horizon A, then horizon B, so-called the subsoil. Then we have the withered rocks, and lastly we have some big rocks here, known as parent rock or horizon D. So now let us look onto details, more especially on the characteristics of each horizon or characteristic of each layer which is formed in the soil profile. But before we go into details on the four main layers which we have mentioned, topsoil, subsoil, weathered rocks, as well as parent rock, we should look first on the this superficial layer. Though we have not mentioned it as the main layer, but sometimes it will also appear. This layer is mainly made up of a little layer of plant residues, and most times in a decomposed form. Decomposed form. Why have we not listed as the main layer? Just because in some of the fields this layer is not available. Most times this layer is commonly found on virgin and undisturbed land. So most of the times this layer will disappear once the land is put to agricultural use. Once you cultivate the land, you find out that this superficial layer, which was saying that it is made up of litter and plant residues, those residues or organic matter, once you cultivate them, they are incorporated into the next layer, which is the topsoil. So that's why it has not been mentioned as the main layer, just because we found that in some of the fields this superficial layer is not available. More especially when you cultivate the land now and again, you find out that those organic matter they will not form their own layer, but rather they will be incorporated into the topsoil. So this layer was saying that it is commonly found on virgin land, or the land which have been which is not disturbed, You cultivated you cultivated once, but now maybe you are putting that land at less bush fallowing. You can find this superficial layer, but nowadays it is difficult to find the layer, just because almost all the fields are cultivated each and every growing season, not giving a room for organic matter to pile up on top of the soil. So, as I've already said, this layer is disregarded since there's no more virgin lands. Apart from that, due to high population leading to shortage of land, which will result into continuous cultivation. Let's now start to look on the top layer of the soil, so-called topsoil, which is also known as the horizon N. Most of the times, some of the authors they do not include the superficial layer just because it is the topmost part of the topsoil. Of course, it is made up of decomposed and decomposed organic matter. So they will just combine the superficial layer and that of topsoil. So most of the times, the topsoil, in terms of the characteristics, it is dark in color due to presence of humus. Where is this humus coming from? The organic matter, which I was talking earlier on, they will decompose now, forming humus. And I mentioned earlier on that humus is dark in color. So the top layer of the soil most of the times is dark in color. Apart from that, due to presence of humus, these humus, they'll start releasing nutrients. So another characteristic of the topsoil is therefore rich in nutrients. Apart from that, this top layer of the soil is where we're going to find some microorganisms and most of the plants are plant roots. Why? This layer, most of the times it is well aerated. That's why you are able to find microorganisms in most of the plant roots. You know that these plant roots, they do respire, they need air. Also, microorganisms will also need air in order for them to survive. So they will multiply more on top layer of the soil just because it is well aerated. It's like a conducive environment for them. But however, this layer can be subjected to leaching. This layer can be subjected to leaching. Most of the times, this layer is not that deep. Most of the times it is not that deep, but though it is deep in some of the areas where they experience deposition process. But in most of the cases, this layer is thin or shallower than the other layers. Subsoil is the second layer or horizon, also known as horizon B. This is beneath the top soil. Most of the times, this layer is more compact and less aerated than top soil. Therefore, it is not always. It is you will find less microorganisms in this layer, the subsoil. But I mentioned earlier on topsoil that the topsoil is subjected to leaching. So most of the times the nutrients or the mineral salts which are carried down from the topsoil through leaching are deposited in this horizon, the subsoil. Therefore, it is also known as a layer of accumulation. Layer of accumulation. We're talking of accumulation of mineral salts which have been leached from the top soil. As I've already said that it is difficult to find more microorganisms here. The same applies even the roots. But if and only if you have in that soil you have some deep-rooted plants, is whereby you find their roots growing up to this region, the subsoil. And most of the times the soils are lighter in color than topsoil. Remember, the topsoil is dark in color, but the subsoil is somehow lighter. And if it is not well cultivated, or if it is cultivated when it is wet, some hard pans start to develop. These hard pans, we're talking of impermeable layers. They start to form, making water and root penetration to be difficult in this case. Then layer number 3 is what we call weathered rocks. This layer is composed of weathered rocks. We're talking of gravel, even coarse rock particles, which are broken down from the parent material. So most of the materials from this zone originate from the bedrock. Once the bedrock has gone some weathering process, the bedrock will break down into some gravel or some large soil particles forming this layer, weathered rocks. Apart from that, the layer is hard and impermeable to water. It is very hard and impermeable to water. And those trees with deep roots, they can also get some water from this layer, more especially during dry season. Then lastly, we have this layer, the bedrock or the parent material. It is also called the substratum, and this zone exists in a solid mass. Most of the times, the rocks are intact, meaning they are unweathered under this zone or this layer. So it is called the parent rock. Most of the times this layer is called the parent rock just because it's the source or origin. It is the origin of inorganic or mineral matter of the soil. As I mentioned earlier on, that in agriculture we believe that the soil came from rocks. So the rock we are talking about here is the same bedrock or the parent rock. Once the parent rock undergo a weathering process, then the rock will disintegrate into some fractions, making the soil. And most of the times, since we're saying that the origin of the soil is the rock, and the nutrient content of the soil, therefore, will depend on the mineral constitution of the parent rock. Definitely will not have only one type of the parent rock down there in the ground. We have different bedrocks, different types of parent rocks or different types of rocks. So different type of rocks will have different mineral constitution. So it will depend on the type of the rock the soil have formed from in terms of nutrient content. For example, if the bedrock was rich in iron, definitely the soil which will be formed from that rock will also be rich in iron. Apart from that, even the color of the soil can also be determined by the parent rock. Just imagine a black rock forming a white soil. That would be impossible. Most of the times, if the parent rock is black, the parent rock is whitish in color, it will form the same color of the soil. So we're saying that the color of the soil can also be determined by the parent rock. Apart from that, the water table is on the surface of the rock. So these are some of the characteristics of the bed. Why wasting time discussing on the soil profile? Soil profile can have some effects in as far as crop production is concerned. So some of the effects are soil depth, compactness of the soil, composition of the parent rock. Let's start with the soil depth. The depth of the horizons or the depth of the layers most of the times will determine the volume of the soil, and this will influence the capacity of that layer to hold water as well as nutrients. Definitely, the deeper the soil, the more water that layer can hold, the more the nutrients that layer can have. Therefore, that in one way or another will influence or will affect crop production. Apart from that, another effect of soil profile is on the compactness of the soil. On compactness of the soil, this will influence the aeration, drainage, as well as root penetration. Most of the times, the layers which are loosely packed, or the soils which are loosely packed, forming a layer, will ensure good aeration, good drainage, as well as good penetration and tuber enlargement. Loosely packed soils are therefore appropriate for growing tuber crops. The opposite can be true. The soils which are compacted together, they will lead to poor aeration, and they will also lead to poor drainage, difficult in terms of root penetration, as well as tuber enlargement. So in one way or another, that can also have an impact in crop production. And lastly, we have composition of the parent rock. This influences the type of minerals present in the soil. Remember, I said that different parent rocks will also have or contain different minerals or mineral salts. So most of the times, if the parent rock had a certain mineral, definitely the soil will also be rich in that same mineral. It will be rich with the same nutrient. Definitely, in that case, that will also affect in crop production in the sense that a different type of crops will also require a different type of nutrients in order for them to grow well. So if a certain parent rock is having maybe the mineral which is not required by that plant, it means that plant will have an impact in terms of production. Yeah, so this makes the end of the topic, and here we are. These are some of the questions I expect you to respond. So you respond via the number which is appearing down there. It is on WhatsApp. You give your response through the number on WhatsApp, or you can use the email address which is indicated down there. Yeah, so next time we're going to start another topic, though on the same soil, which is soil fertility.
Yanu kufunafuna mapunziro muzakhala wotumidwa moyo wanu wonse. Ngati simuphunzira anthu azingokutumani ajala kalime ajala kuchwe manyazi ajala katende yanti ndipo anthu ophunzira wandi wotumanso kwambiri. Ndiye ngati simuphunzira skulu akuyikirani apa mukhala otumidwa.